IAFF Fire Ground Survival Program has taught thousands of firefighters the essential self-survival techniques that make the difference between life and death in a Mayday situation. This module focuses on the behavioral elements of a Mayday incident and the psychological and physiological aspects of survival that can interfere with a firefighter's ability to survive. It will show you how to develop a survival mindset. Your host, Derek Alconis, joined by Lawrence Gonzalez, author of the book Deep Survival: Who Lives, Who Dies, and Why. Deep Survival was the first scientific book on survival. Since its publication, this bestseller has been embraced by everyone from the head of training for the Navy SEALs to the Sloan School of Management at MIT, and now the IAFF Fire Ground Survival Program. The book introduces us to the idea that emotions can hijack our brains and take over our behavior. To learn more about this concept, the 12 traits of survivors, and how to improve your survivability, visit the Deep Survival website at www.deepsurvival.com.
In this module, we'll look at 2 actual Mayday incidents and then connect the experiences of the firefighters who survived with current research on survival. As the firefighters tell what happened to them, remember that we're not here to assign blame. We're here to learn from their experience. The first incident occurred in Winnipeg, Manitoba.
On the evening of February 4th, 2007, in frigid weather, a fire started in a home on a quiet cul-de-sac in Winnipeg, Manitoba. The fire department responded quickly and attacked the fire. The homeowners were away. Their teenaged son, a daughter, and the family dog were already out of the house. 2 crews under Captains Harold Lessard and Thomas Nichols, officers with more than 30 years of service each, were assigned to enter the house and search for fire extension and anyone remaining. Flames engulfed the garage where the fire started. The 6 firefighters searching the second floor encountered light smoke with fair visibility. But as they proceeded, the heat coming from the garage side of the house increased and the flashover occurred. Despite the minus 40-degree temperature outside, fire in the house reached more than 500 degrees Celsius, over 930 degrees Fahrenheit. Heat so extreme, it melted the firefighters' radios. As the order came to evacuate, heat increased dramatically and visibility went to black. 4 firefighters successfully escaped from the burning building. Captain Lessard was unconscious and pulled through a window by other firefighters. As flames destroyed the building, paramedics treated the 4 burned and injured firefighters and prepared them for transport. Sadly, the 2 captains did not make it. The RIC team found the body of Captain Nichols on the second floor of the house. Captain Lessard never regained consciousness.
Now, Lawrence, you have written extensively about the behavioral aspects of survival. Now, what is the difference between a person who remains calm and survives and one who struggles to remember and use life-saving skills and may not make it?
You can think of the brain as having 2 main modes of operation. One is logic and reason, and the other is emotion, and they work like a seesaw. If emotion or stress gets too high, you can't reason, you can't remember things, you can't think straight. Whereas if you can force yourself to think straight and think logically and reason, you can push emotion down a little and get a better balance. So it's the person who's able to affect this balance who's going to survive.
Now, Lionel, you and Scott were searching the second floor. What was it like just before and just after things went bad? Describe that for us.
So just before, everything was still routine. We're going through doing a search like we've done before, so everything was routinely done, and you felt comfortable with it. Then just after, things were still, felt confident that we knew what we were doing, knew where to go.
Probably done this several times before.
Exactly. But not quite as bad. But we still knew we had an out. The first exit was blocked. We knew we had a room we just searched. But things changed for me when I was knocked down and I was separated from Scott. I was disoriented. I had no plan. I didn't know where I was anymore. So that's when things started to get bad for me.
How about for you, Scott? Describe what you experienced.
I think, as Lionel was saying, when we were going back towards the known egress point of the stairs, everything was relatively routine. It was just a building evacuation. when we realized that the stairs were blocked by that extreme heat, it escalated, like the stress escalated, but we still figured we could find a window. We just searched the bedroom and that we could go to a window, so I did a 180 from crawling and crawled back into the bedroom and started looking for a window. But as the heat got so extreme that it went from right through from the top to the bottom, like down to our boot level, I started having a moment of thinking, I don't know if we're going to make it out of here, and started having the feeling of, if we don't get a window here quickly, we're going to be killed.
Now, Lawrence, I'm sure you've written about these type of experiences before, but how do you prepare for a situation like this?
Well, training is the first path to success in these things. And the more realistic the training is, the better, and the more training you get, the better, because this actually moves things out of the frontal area of the brain where you think of things logically down into other areas of the brain where you do things by habit. But on the other hand, if you look at people like fighter pilots and firefighters and people who deal with extreme circumstances, you find that they're really very calm. And when you talk to them, they have this demeanor of sort of an inner quiet that they have learned to cultivate. And they cultivate this not just on the training ground, but in their lives as well. And that kind of inner calm that permeates your life is something that really will help you in an emergency.
Now, Lionel, you and Scott both say it came on so fast, this change of conditions. Scott, how did the intense conditions affect your thought process?
Well, while we were crawling, it was a matter of being focused and just the simple task of trying to find a window. When the heat started escalating, the urgency went up. The panic level started to get up of we have to find this now. And
now, had you ever experienced this before in your career?
Never. We had done live burns with real heat, but nothing of this level. Nothing where the heat had penetrated our equipment, which was brand new, right to the skin. I had never experienced any heat like that.
Did you call a mayday at this point?
No, I didn't call a mayday. We were so focused on crawling to the window, it was something that never even flashed through my mind, was to alert everybody of what was going on inside of the house. We were just singularly focused on finding a window.
Now, Lionel, what was happening to you at this point? And what were you thinking? What was going through your mind?
First thing after I got up, I was flat on my back and I got up, first thing I went to was my thermal imager. I just wanted to orient myself. I didn't know where I was at this point. I thought I got flipped onto the other side of the house. I looked up and basically I couldn't even see the screen hardly. We were having a lot of the carbon was basically coming onto our mask and I couldn't see through, but what I could see of the imager's screen was just white. Everything was the same color. So I basically dropped it and just went back and started to on my right. That's what we were doing before, and that's what I went back to. And the heat intensified so much that all I could think about was a window. All we needed was a window, and that's all I kept saying. I kept repeating myself.
Let's go to Lawrence now. What do we know, Lawrence, about trying to access information stored in our memories in a life or death situation? Now, how do we do that?
Well, for most people in the situation that they're describing, most people wouldn't get out of that. It's too intense. And because of the lack of training and the lack of cultivating the ability to calm your emotional system, you would essentially just panic and perish. Because these guys are trained and because they have the kind of personalities they have as well, they were able to remain in control long enough. And it is really a battle between the emotional system and the thinking brain. And this struggle goes on, and some people lose it and some people don't. But these guys were able to keep enough control in this incredible emergency to get to the windows finally.
Now, Lionel, what did you go from thinking that was it to you're going to make it out? And what was your mindset there?
After being disoriented, I was starting to get a little panicked. But then I did go back and I went to my right side, so I started along the wall, and that's where I came across Captain Lessard. And we together made our way into another bedroom and found a window. And that's when I went up and started breaking the window. But having the captain there beside me gave me some sort of security, even though things were getting bad and I felt we were both screaming to each other back and forth. It sort of gave me a solace that at least we're together, doing it together. And that's it was still a horrible moment, but the comfort I got was at least we were together, doing it together.
You were talking to each other.
Screaming back and forth. Yeah.
You were helping him to the window several times. How about you, Scott, in your situation? What was your thoughts?
Well, I guess as we were crawling into the bedroom to try to find that window, the heat was so extreme that there was a point where I thought I had a clear thought in my head of, I don't know if we're going to make it out of this. And it was almost as soon as that thought entered my head, I just had a quick picture of my wife and my baby that we'd had just previous, flashed into my head, and it seemed to focus again on trying to find that window. And this was all while moving through there. It was almost like a motivation popped in.
You comment on that, Lawrence?
Yeah, it's a very, very common thing among survivors of almost any extreme emergency that they will think of someone that they need to get back to. It'll be, I've got to get back to my son, in a case where a guy I interviewed was drowning in a river and pulled himself out. Or I have to, it would kill my mother if I die in this incident. But they're doing it for someone outside of themselves, and that seems to give a more powerful motivation.
What we're learning about survivability is that the battle may be won or lost in your head. We need to be able to access our survival procedures and skills quickly from our memories. We have little time to think through the process. Often we must act by instinct to survive. Lionel and Scott, I know it's never easy to relive a Mayday. Thank you for telling us your stories. Our next video shows a fire in Northern Virginia that went bad fast, again, with people in danger on the second floor. Let's look, and then we'll talk with the firefighters.
Sunday, May 25, 2008, Memorial Day weekend. Fire started in this single-family residence at 43238 Meadowood Court in Leesburg, Virginia. Just after 1 p.m., a neighbor reported the fire to Loudoun County Fire and Rescue. Within a minute, another call came in reporting a second fire incident requiring a simultaneous fire response. First on the scene were Tower 6 and Reserve Engine 6, each with a crew of 3. 4 firefighters entered the building, unaware the fire was in the sunroom on the first floor, and advanced a line to the second floor to search for occupants and initiate a fire attack. As units continued to arrive and initial command was established, fire from the first floor reached flashover. On the second floor,
any progress from the outside, visibility is 0.
While the heat rapidly became life-threatening. Through a coordinated rescue effort and the training and professional composure of the trapped firefighters, all 4, although badly burned and requiring hospitalization, came out alive.
Command allowed. We have full accountability of all firefighters on the Mayday.
We're joined by members of the Loudoun County Fire and Rescue crew that responded to Meadowood Court. Brandy, Micah, John, and Jack. Now, Micah, you and Brandy were on the second floor. I want you to describe how conditions were on that second floor when things started to get really bad.
When things started to get really bad, there wasn't a whole lot of time to do a whole lot of thinking other than to try to move towards an exit. We made our way out of the master bedroom into the hallway on the second floor and were met by fire. It was at that point when I realized that we were in a really bad spot and I was unsure whether we were going to be able to survive or not.
Now tell me about your radio.
My radio was inoperable due to the lapel mic. My fingers were actually melting into the lapel mic.
Do you feel pain in your fingers and your body from the heat that you were experiencing?
We felt pain no matter what we did. It seemed like our gear was holding the heat. No matter how you moved, you were feeling the heat through your gear. One thing of note is every breath that we were taking, our cylinders had heated up from the environment that we were in, and every breath we were taking was starting to become hot or superheated air.
At that point, what do you think your chance of survival was? I mean, Brandy, why don't you answer that question?
Probably slim to none. It was just one of those things where everything happened so fast, and by the time you realized that things were going bad, that it just what you weren't going to get out.
All right, Lawrence, paint the picture for us.
Well, they're in a situation in which a normal person simply wouldn't survive because the emotional reaction and the stress would be so great the person wouldn't be able to think or function. Because of their superior training and also their personalities, they were able to remain in control, and under these incredibly difficult circumstances, Micah was describing at one point feeling like he was breathing about 100 times a minute and having to consciously slow his breathing. This is one of the things that we can do to save ourselves in these situations, is breathe and analyze what's going on and then act on that analysis. And he was able to do that. These people were able to do that successfully.
Now, Micah, you mentioned before that you felt like you were going to die, and you had the responsibility for your crew as well. Talk about that. You know, this responsibility that you have for your crew, and then the desire to survive and to get everybody out of there alive.
One of the first things that came to my mind as we were going through that situation was that Lieutenant Early, John, was separated from us immediately. At that point, it was recognized that we didn't have contact with him anymore. Due to the rapidly deteriorating conditions, in my mind, I thought that he was dead. And that was what was going through my mind, because we had no voice contact, no visual contact. We lost all contact with him. The only thing that I knew at that point was that I had Jackie and Brandy with me, and it felt like it was my responsibility as the captain to get them out.
Now, John, you were separated from the rest of the crew here. Talk about the separation and talk about what your thoughts were.
Initially, after there was a collapse of debris that separated me, it was probably a split second that I was able to kind of regroup and figure out what I needed to do. I knew I was cut off from them and that more or less I was on my own. And, I guess, the basic training kicked in.
So where were you at this point?
I was more or less back in the doorway from the master bedroom. At one point I looked at my thermal imager and the screen was whited out, so it was, wasn't doing me any good. I was able to find a wall and follow it around into the master bathroom, where I was trying to make one of my first attempts to getting out.
Now, what can we learn from this, Lawrence, about being alone and the survival mindset of now he's separated from his crew?
Yeah, well, in a group, you tend to have greater strength and greater ability to survive if your group is composed of trained people. Now, this is not true of just any group, because if you just put people together randomly, you get weak links in the group that can undermine the whole group. But these are all trained firefighters, so definitely being alone puts you at a grave disadvantage in these situations. You've lost your other people, and you're not only worried about yourself, but you don't know what's happening to others. So psychologically, it can be very debilitating, and it's remarkable and commendable how he behaved in this situation, because he got himself into a position where he came to a window he couldn't get out of and still thought his way through.
Right. I think it's remarkable that, Micah, your radio burned up, is inoperable. Jack, you had a radio. You gave the mayday.
Correct.
You had a clarity of mind to be able to transmit that mayday. Tell us about, just prior to that transmission and what your thoughts were.
Just prior to that, it was moments after the flashover, and the heat had pushed us to the floor, at which point I scrambled out of the doorway and down a wall a little ways, and I ran head on into, I think it was a TV, and it kind of hit the reset button. That panic started to creep up, and at that point, I could feel my hands burning, and the best way to describe it is like putting your hands in a hornet nest, just that stinging. And I knew that if I stayed in that room, I was dead. And just, we've done so much training on call a mayday, and it immediately popped in my head. And the only thing I could think to say was the mayday, who we were and where we were. I deviated from the actual protocol of it, but figured that was the important stuff.
Now, you've all hit on this training element and how your training has served you well in this situation. Brandy, talk about that. Talk about how you dug deep into your memory and how to do things and how that helped.
Well, we always had a thing at the station where we went out every day. Whether we were motivated or not, we just pushed ourselves to go out and do stuff every day. We had a training house. Micah and John were very particular about we were going to go there, show up, and whatever they had decided for us to do that day, we were going to do. It wasn't a set, okay, guys, this is what we're going to go out and do for the day. It was literally we covered our face pieces or we smoked the house up. We went in and did what we're trained to do, and they threw us into a situation. They threw stuff on top of us. They made us bail out the windows, things like that. So we had no idea it was coming. It was just, you had to do it. You were put in a situation and you had to make the decision of what you were going to do. And I just feel like that made our incident that day. All of us were so calm, which is why we're here today talking about this. We were all worked up right then and there at that point, and you just rely back to what you know, and that was, if I don't stay calm, it's going to be worse than if I do stay calm. If I stay calm, I do have that chance of possibly
Well,
getting
it's not
out.
only being trained in these procedures and these skills, but it's also being disciplined to be able to follow your leader. And just talk about that for a little bit. And
Well, Mike has always been an awesome officer. He's very experienced, very positive. He, works so hard. And when you get stuck in a situation like that, the first thing that you're thinking is, I just want to get out. So sometimes you want to deviate away from everybody else. But I guess knowing that if we're together, you just have to put your trust in that person that they're gonna make it happen, and you'll make it out.
Well, Lawrence, let's talk about training and the importance of training and changing behaviors.
What she's talking about really is, interestingly enough, it's related to things like this. If you try to learn to play tennis and you've never played before, you're going to have to think through every step. You're going to be awkward. It's not going to be smooth. It's happening up front in the frontal cortex where your conscious stepwise thinking occurs, right? But as you practice, it begins to get smooth, and you pretty soon get good at it, and you don't have to think about it anymore, and you automatically return a serve, and it's a nice shot. Well, this same brain area that's doing that, it's called the basal ganglia, is what's involved in forming habits of all sorts. And when you train the way firefighters train and do it really assiduously and all the time, this is what happens. Your behavior becomes automatic and goes into that part of the brain. So you become smooth and you become responsive even under terrible circumstances. And I think Micah mentioned earlier, sometimes you don't have to think. You're better off not thinking, you're better doing what you know how to do and get yourself out of there. So it works. Training works.
Now, Jack, you were in the room with Micah and Brandy, and put us in the room and take us through what was going through your mind as you started to perform the actions of survival and eventually make it out that window.
In the room with them, I actually thought at the time that it was Micah that was in front of me, when actually it was Brandy, because you just couldn't see. All I knew was somebody was there. There's a lot of talking back and forth, but couldn't really make out what everybody was saying, just because the density.
And what were conditions in the room at the time?
Horrible. Absolutely horrible.
You were down on the ground? Did you see one another?
No, not at all. Smoke was just that thick.
Kind of yelling at each other through your mask?
Yeah. I remember at one point we had stopped. I believe it was when Micah came across the bathroom and felt the tile floor. But there was a pause for a second, and I kind of sat back on my calves a little bit, and instantly could feel them burn. And the rest, feel my arms burning and stuff. And it was, at that point, it was ignore it, keep moving forward.
And so you move forward, you
Yeah.
get to the window, and eventually all of you have to bail out of that window.
Yeah, I mean, we get to the window and just start tearing it apart. Because, it's, I guess it's that you see that opening. It's like, there's our way out. So it was just pure focus. Pretty much everything else, with the exception of John, everything else didn't matter.
Right.
The heat didn't matter. The smoke didn't matter.
Now, Brandy, as you made your way to that window, as you were the first one out, was it automatic? Did you know what you were doing at the time? Do you feel like, you know what, everything was going that direction? I needed to get out. I needed to get out quickly because we only had so much time for the others to get out. And, how was your body reacting to that?
Well, I wanted to get out there, obviously. I mean, it was just so hot. No matter what way you moved, no matter what you were trying to do, you just felt it. I mean, I remember Jackie and I just constantly screaming at Micah, telling him that we were burning up, Cap, we're burning up. And he knew that there was nothing he could do about it, and we knew too. It was just that reaction. And as soon as we got to the window, your instincts to want to just jump out and get out of that so you're not feeling that hurt anymore. But honestly, I just wanted them to get out first. I mean, that's your crew. That's, we're in this situation, and there is nothing that you can do for yourself or for anybody else. And I think, everybody in the fire service wants to take care of their crew before they take care of themselves. Everybody goes home, everybody harps on that. So I just wanted them to get out first, and obviously their plan was different, which is why I got shoved out the window first.
And Micah, she gets hung up on the ladder, and you got to help her. Tell us what's going through your mind.
First thing that went through my mind is, why is she not off the ladder yet? We're waiting to get out also, but what had actually happened was her arm became stuck and she actually needed help getting back onto the ladder. So I went out the ladder head first and got a hold of her somehow and ended up getting her flipped back onto the ladder, and she continued down. And I had to back into the house to get out of the way for Jackie to come out.
Yeah, how did you have the presence of mind to do that? How did you? There was so much going on. I mean, we really can't capture it in our words, I think. It's very difficult to do that. But things were happening so fast. And Jack was waiting for his opportunity to get out the window. You had to climb out, unhook her, and keep people coming out. Was it training? Was it your responsibility as a leader? Was it, and what drove you at that point?
I think that the two parts that you just hit there was, first would be the training, then the second would be the training of being a leader in the situation. At least in my opinion, you didn't have to think a whole lot about what was occurring. It was instinctive. We'd gone over things like that before, and training certainly does work. Even before we ever got in that bedroom, was recognized that my breathing patterns had changed, that I needed to slow down my breathing, that we were better off by all three of us that I knew were still alive being together to make it out. To when the first room that we came into recognized that it was a bathroom because my hand slid across the floor and it was an inward swinging door, that a bathroom wasn't where we needed to be to get out of this structure, and just continuing on. But it was exactly that, is number one was training, and number two was being taught how to be a leader. And I think that's a big reason why we're still here, with number one being the training portion of it.
Right. Now, your experience, John, you were separated from the crew due to the ceiling collapse, and you're alone. You're in that room. There's the presence of mind that you had to get out of that window. Can you just take us through that?
At that point, I really hadn't, had any kind of death thoughts or impending doom or anything like that. You know, when I gotten into the bathroom and was taking my tool and trying to break this window that we found out later was a type of safety glass, you know, I'm taking baseball bat swings on this window, and in doing that, I'm feeling my skin sliding back and forth in my gloves. You know, I knew I was messed up bad, and time was of the essence. And, you know, it got to the point where I'm getting exhausted. I can't get this window broke. And that's when everything hit me that, you know, I'm going to die here. And, you know, I started to get the life parade going by, and it stopped at a recent picture of my wife and daughter. And it was like, you know, a slap in the face that, you know, this isn't going to end here. I can't die here. And that's when I got myself back out of the bathroom and proceeded on to find the window that I finally came out.
Now everyone is out, burned, injured, in pain, but alive. Lawrence.
You know, I study survival all the time of all kinds of terrible situations, and these people are remarkable to me for their ability to do what Micah was saying, which is to revert to their training, to do what they have to do next, enduring terrible pain, which is just a hard thing to conceptualize if you haven't had the experience. I haven't had that experience, but I know how painful burns are because I've worked with people in burn units before. And to sit there with your own flesh burning and to be able to take these steps is a remarkable thing. And I think it's attributable both to their training and to their personalities, to have this inner core that I refer to in my writing, this inner core of sort of quiet and calm from which you can exert your influence. I think another thing is that Micah had the true leadership qualities that mean he's not going to let things happen to his crew. And this, in effect, ensures his survival. He has what's known as an internal locus of control. That's what psychologists call this. People generally have either an internal locus of control or an external locus. If you have an external locus of control, you think things are happening to you. It's like you're always complaining, you expect to be rescued, you know, why did this happen to me, kind of attitude. This is not a good attitude to have in an emergency. You have an internal locus of control. It says, I have some influence on my environment, I can make things happen. When bad things happen, I can make them work in my favor. So you're constantly being an active, essentially, participant in your fate rather than a victim of fate. And I think the fact that these people all had that quality contributed a lot to their survival.
We've come a long way toward improving survivability for firefighters. Better equipment, better procedures. We're still working on adequate staffing levels for all departments. And this kind of research into the survival mindset, knowing how and what to think and do when you know you might die, is going to help save lives on the fireground. The take-home message from this module is that we must prepare for the Mayday, not only physically, but mentally as well. Anticipate what can go wrong and execute your system for survival. I want to thank you all for sharing your experiences and your expertise with us. It's important to share the lessons learned in fires like these, so we'll be better armed for the next fires.
In a companion module, Time to Survival, these same firefighters talk about their Mayday experience with experts from Underwriters Laboratories and the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, who are doing research on the behavior of fires.